Hey everybody, welcome to the Improv Summit. This is Spencer, as always, and with me I have a wonderful fellow Greek with me, and by Greek I don't mean a college buddy, I mean an actual person with the heritage from Greece. It's Damian. How's it going today?
Wonderful. Hey, Spencer, how you doing?
Good,
Opa.
good. There it is. Well, Efaristo, for being on my show. I don't know Greek, but I do know Efaristo.
Parakalo. That means
Ah,
that you're welcome. There you go.
I knew that much. I got that much. But for those who are listening or watching, if I still is thank you. Parakolos, you're welcome. Yasu is hello. I guess I should actually say what Kali Spera. More of an
Kalispera,
evening for you.
Kalinikta.
Yeah, it's
You
more of
know
an
the
evening
curse
for
words,
you.
of course, right?
Oh, I know skata.
Yeah, see? Yeah, that's always the first thing you
Amount of
learn.
times my mom has said that as a kid, when I was a kid. Yeah, okay. Or like elado, elado. You know some things. Punito baño. We could talk about it all day. Also, I've had about 250 days on Duolingo, so I'm getting there. And I said something to Greek, said something to my mom in Greek the other day, and she goes, "Wow, you're really pronouncing everything very well." But then she always is like, "What are you saying?" And I'm like, "This is what I'm saying." She's like, "Oh yeah, well we say this instead." I'm like. My mom is so funny because she learned Greek before she learned English, so
Your gibberish is very well pronunciated, right?
exactly. And then we'll watch movies in Greek, and so she'll like watch the subtitles, and she'll be like, "Nope, they had a translation. Nope, that was a translation issue." And I was like, "Mom, I just watched the movie." Anyway, Greek moms, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. Greek dads, I guess Greek parents in general are
in
like that.
general.
Anyway, let's dive into what we're actually here for, which is to talk about improv, and not improv in Greek, but improv in English, but it translates to any language you want. Just tell me a little bit about your improv background.
Yeah, well, I suppose it was probably 12, 13, 15 years ago, somewhere around there. I was working in IT as a software tester, where most people's improv experience begins. I think that's a pretty old story.
Mhm.
No, I was working just as a software tester at an IT company, and a coworker came to me one day and said, "Hey, you got to come and watch my graduation. I'm graduating from an improv class," and I didn't even know what that meant. But they were a good friend of mine, and I went to their show, and graduation from their year-long training was a public performance. And I went, and it was fantastic, and I laughed and had a grand old time. And afterwards, she said, you should really try this. You'd seem like somebody that would really take to improv. And I thought, all right. So she set me up with the local improv instructor here in Columbus, Ohio. And I thought, well, I'll take this improv until it's no longer fun. As long as it's fun, I'll do it. And 1 week turned into 2 weeks, and 2 weeks turned into 2 months, and on and on. And I went through class one and class two and teacher one and teacher two, and it stretched on for a year, and weekly or biweekly training. And at the end of it, I had my own public performance graduation. And so that's kind of how I got into improv. It never became boring. It was always fun. Came pretty close a few times, but I stuck with it, and I'm glad I did. And so after I graduated, the class started with 50 or 60 people, and by the time we graduated, there was 7 or 8 of us left.
Wow.
So people got what they needed out of the weeks and months as they went on, and they didn't necessarily want to perform on stage in front of people. They got what they needed out of the improv training, which makes sense to me.
Mm-hmm.
So
Absolutely.
the 7 or 8 of us that remained, we decided to stick around, and we formed a group called Parlor Tricks, and we started opening for more established improv groups at some shows here in Columbus, Ohio. So we did a lot of bar prov and some small comedy clubs and perform in movie theaters and outdoor festivals. And I performed with Parlor Tricks for about 5 or 6 years. And then I left them and joined up with a more established improv group in Columbus called Fake Bacon. And we used to do a corporate engagement, same type of bar prov, a lot of comedy clubs. And I performed hundreds of shows over about 10 years. And that led to all sorts of other wonderful improv related things. I teach improv. I wrote an improv book. I enjoy improv. It's become a part of my life. I'm a public speaker, and I've incorporated improv into the things that I speak and teach about to people all over the world. So in a nutshell, that's the origin story of how I got into improv.
That's awesome. And you've answered all my questions. So I guess we're done here. No, I'm just
Great.
kidding.
Nice to meet you.
You too. Take care. No, but actually the things that you mentioned, I definitely want to hit on as we go through. So this is exciting because you said you teach, you wrote a book, which I've read. We'll talk about that later. I'll give you my real thoughts on it. Just kidding when we get to it. But also what you've applied from improv into a non-improv related field, which I guess in a theory, public speaking has its own. Anyways, the point is, let's dive into the next question. This is where I told you my segues were not great, and I just say, anyway, in this segue, we have another question, and that's usually what happens. So this is when I start to like feel self-conscious about my segues, and so I'm just gonna ask the next question.
Sure.
The next question is, do you have any like favorite types of improv? Like, or like, you know, some people like short form, some people like long form, some people narrative genre, whatever. And again, people are like, I don't have a favorite, which is fine. But like, are there any types of improv that you felt you were like, I love doing this, or like something that's underrated is this, like whatever that means to you as far as types of improv that you enjoy?
Well, I have a favorite. It's I suppose if I had to choose, it'd be comedic short form, because that's what I was taught, and I grew up learning, I guess, in class, and that's mostly what I performed on stage. I've seen shows with long form. I've seen musicals that were completely improvised. An old group called I Love Pandas, or I Eat Pandas. Gosh darn it, I wish I remembered their name. Two women that made hour-long musicals just by themselves. It was fantastic. So I appreciate those types, but I think the type that I like doing myself the best, and the type that I often go to and lean on as I talk to others about improv, is short form comedic. At least as a performative art. More generally and abstractly, I sometimes tell people that we have been improvising our entire lives. And I think that that's not a stretch to think that if you walk out the door in the morning and you have a plan on how to get where you're going, and there's a roadblock, you don't just freeze in your tracks, you improvise. So we've been doing it our entire lives. So in that sense, maybe life improv is my favorite. But I think as a performance art, comedic short form, which is probably what you're asking.
Sure. I mean, I think both of those are great. I think life improv, we improv. Gosh, I can't say that word anymore. We improvise every day in our general lives, but also I'm glad that you said comedic short form, because a lot of people tend to cater towards long form, because a lot of people, there's a lot more long form, it feels like, than there is short form. And, you know, I did the big schools. I did IO, I did Second City, I've done UCB, which all in their own way have their own philosophies, but generally tends to lean more on long form than short form. And so I was like, I'm going to take all these long forms. And then it wasn't until I did Comedy Sports in Los Angeles where I discovered short form. And I was like, my brain is so much more catered to short form. And I wish I had found short form before I found long form, because I love both equally, like for their own reasons. But I think understanding improv for me, short form would have been the way for me to understand it quicker and more efficiently than doing it in long form. But you know, having done long form, I felt like there were some benefits going into short form, and then doing short form, there were definitely benefits that I gained to do long form from it. So, you know, I think so I'm glad you said short form.
In many art forms, there's different types, and I wouldn't say that one art form is better than another. Sculpting is better than painting, or painting is better than dancing. That's ludicrous to say that. And to say that short form is better than long form, or vice versa, I think is also ludicrous. They're just different, and they each have pros and cons. They have different advantages and disadvantages. I'm a lifelong cartoonist. I've been an artist since I was a young child, and my preferred form of art, as far as drawing, is cartooning. And some people would say, oh, well, cartooning, you're not an artist, you're not a painter, you don't use watercolors or pastels.
You're not in a museum.
Exactly. But I would disagree. I would say that similar to short form versus long form, sometimes there's unfair negative connotations with certain types of art that should not be so, in my opinion.
I love that. And also the fact that improv is this interesting community where you want to support and yes and each other. But if you're like, oh, this is better than this, you're no longer yes anding or supporting the entirety of the community. Yes. And it's not like it's like that bad. I mean, there's like gentle ribbing. I think that it's like, oh, short form, long form. Yeah. Like there's not like people who are like, I can't. I mean, there are people who don't like one form or the other, but for the most part, it feels like it's like this weird, like gentle ribbing of a competition of like, which is better, short or long form? Which one's better? And so
that's fine with me. The gentle ribbing and the camaraderie that comes with teasing one another about their chosen style is fine with me. But if it becomes more devious than that, it becomes problematic, I think.
Yeah, I agree. That's
It seems like
there's a
selective
lot.
yes and.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I'll yes and on stage, but I won't yes and your real life idea.
Oh yeah, it's like selective hearing, where you just kind of hear certain things on stage, and then you decide to be selfish on other moments, and not listen to your scene partner. But that's a whole another story for another day. I'm not bitter about it or anything.
I
No,
didn't get
I'm
that. No,
literally, I don't
no.
know. I would. It's actually funny because I say this as someone who has no confidence and didn't have any confidence. I lost all my confidence, got it back with improv. No one would consider me a steamroller by any means at all. And if someone did say I was steamrolling, I would be like, I don't know how. I am not a steamroller in improv. I'm like backline, like Bobby. That's the new term now. I'm backline Bobby. I'm like, what do you need from me for support? You want me to come in as a one-liner? You want me to tag you out? Okay, got it. You want me to edit? Okay, I got this. I'm like a backline Bobby. Like I thrive in the backline, which is so weird because everyone wants to like perform on stage, and I'm like, yeah, I'll go out, but I'm not gonna like constantly try and get in a scene. I'm gonna constantly just be like doing this whole like waiting to edit thing of like oh, and people watch me sometimes because I like to like laugh. Well, I like laugh when the scene is funny. I'm like laughing so hard that I'm like, I gotta go backstage sometimes because I'm like, I can't. I'm just like laughing so hard on stage watching the scene that I sometimes draw focus that way by accident. But I'm not a steamroller by any means.
uh, I love
But
that.
yeah. Anyway, on another segue, here's my poor object work of segueing. On this segue, on a new segue,
Yes,
these are I probably got more dad jokes coming. Just you wait.
I am
Um,
one, so they're right up my alley. That's
you're a
perfect.
dad or you're a joke.
Yes.
See, there you go. There's another two. That was a twofer right there. Yeah. Anyway, are there any? I'm going to kind of group all of these together into one. So pick and choose what you want.
Mhm.
Any favorite, or should I say memorable, warm-up games, short form games, scenes that you've done, scenes that you've taught, shows that you've performed in, shows that you've taught, any moments that that stand out? Because a lot of times in improv we always forget what we did because it's improv. We're not planning it, so it just happens and it goes. But there are those moments where you're like, you always remember like the really bad ones, and you always really
Yeah.
remember the really good ones, but not a lot of the in between. But for positivity's sake, what are like some memorable, like positive, memorable games, warm-ups, moments, scenes, favorite games, whatever you want to pick and choose from that?
I've got two moments from
Great.
all of my stage time that stick out particularly to me that I was
Awesome.
proud of myself. They got a good. I was proud of how I reacted at the moment, and also the reaction it elicited from the audience. It really made me proud. So I'll give you both of them if you're
Yeah,
okay.
absolutely.
The first was a game. Whatever the names are, people name them different things, and there might be a standard name, but the idea behind this gimmicky short form game was we're given a suggestion and we start doing a scene, and the characters at some point will start to stutter. And whatever letter they're stuttering with, somebody else will fill in the word with that beginning letter. So you get it. I might say, hey, when are we going to the, and somebody else will say, steam engine? Yeah, when are we going to the steam engine? So that's the idea behind this game.
Okay.
And therein lies the comedy, you see.
Right.
So we were doing that game, and somebody on stage said, "Boy, I can't seem to remember where I put the And I started thinking, okay, as another character in this scene, car or cat or carriage or what's a good word to stick in here? And before I could speak, somebody else said kangaroo. I said, yeah, where did I put the kangaroo? And before they could say anything, I said, oh, I thought it was a hard C. And that kind of resonated with the audience, who might have also been thinking instead of the K with the K was a hard C consonant. And that killed, that made everybody laugh. And the scene kind of dissolved after that because it just was kind of breaking the fourth wall. Anyway, I don't often break the fourth wall, but that type of break I thought really resonated with the audience. And another one was I was hosting a game. I was introducing a game, and I introduced the title and a brief introduction. And I said, all right, what I need from you, and this was in a comedy club with maybe 100 people or so. And I said, I need an occupation. And somebody yelled out, lawyer. And I said, that's ordinary. Something else more unique, more interesting. And doctor and accountant. Come on, something else. And people started to yell out more and more occupations. And I said, come on, get creative, get unique. And they started yelling out more and more. And it kind of crescendo. The audience started speaking and yelling over each other. It got louder and louder until it was cacophony in this club and everybody was screaming. And it went on for an uncomfortable amount of time. And I wasn't even speaking in the microphone anymore. I was just kind of going like this, and, come on, egging the crowd on more and more. And the players behind me were just wondering, what is Damian doing here? And it went on until it's like a popcorn in a microwave started to die down. And at the very end, I said, all right, I think I heard lawyer, which was the very first suggestion.
Right.
And that killed. The audience lost it. They didn't even play the game because they knew they couldn't get a bigger laugh than that. So that was another time I kind of felt like I didn't plan that out. It just kind of happened.
That's awesome.
And it was fun. But what's interesting about that is years later, I was at an event and a guy was doing a variety show. And he needed a filler act, something just to stick in. He had a couple minutes. And I just met him and he said, hey, I've heard you do improv. Do you want to do something? I said, yeah, let me think of something to do. I had like an hour to think of something. And I remembered that story I just told you. So without telling him, I got up and I recreated that entire thing, which was pretty easy. And it slayed, it killed. So what started as a completely improvised moment turned into something that could pretty easily be recreated and for the same effect.
Re-improvisation, improv to sketch, good old Second City philosophy there. Taking something you improvise and reformatting it and twisting it and changing it and getting feedback and then turning it into a scene, a sketch. And I'll tell you, it's funny to do improv and they're like, okay, after we do this, we're going to do it again. And you improvise a scene and they're like, here's some notes. And we're like, we did that in the scene. I don't even remember this. And we just did the scene. Yeah. So I will say, people thinking that going from improv to sketch is easy, it's actually quite difficult, especially if you don't remember what you just did.
I was in 2 plays. Improv got me, that community, the improv community led me to the local theater community in Columbus. And after a while, I got cast in a few plays, some comedic plays. And one of them, we did 2 of them, two different seasons, Twilight Zone, rather take on the Twilight Zone, the classic black and white episodes. So the director, he was one of our fellow improvisers. He would give us the basic structure, and everybody that was cast in this play was an improviser, and he would give us just the basic setup, and we would just improvise. And he would take notes, and then he went back home and created a play that we put on for several weeks, the Twilight Zone, based on 2 classic episodes. But it was the same type of thing. What we improvised in the moment, seeing it later on paper is like, what? We did that? I can't remember. It's hilarious, but I don't remember saying that or doing that.
Oh yeah, it's wild how it's also even like when you get audience members who are like, it was so funny when you did that thing, and I'm like, thank you. And they're like, the scene, and I'm like, yeah, yep. And I've done it like I'm on a 2-prov team, and we go through and we'll just be like, let's do like 20 minutes or whatever, and then let's talk about it afterwards. So we'll go through, we'll do the 20 minutes. We have like very strong choices and all this stuff, and at the end we're like, okay, so the first thing we did was, wait, what was the first? We're like, what was the first thing we did? We're like, okay, we just did this scene. And then we're like, okay, what did we do right before that? We're like, was it the squirrels? No, the squirrels was third. What was fourth? What was between the squirrel? And it like takes us 10 minutes to figure out the order of what we just did, because when you're like in the moment, you don't necessarily think about like, because that especially in an improv scene, I'm not going to necessarily come back to this. I might if I do like a callback or whatever the case is. But if it's a herald, you're definitely going to come back to some things. But I'm not necessarily, because I've done the scene is over, I'm now moving on to the next thing. What is the next thing? It's always thinking of like being in the moment, essentially, is what improv is. So I'm always thinking in that moment. So now that those moments have been 20 minutes, I'm like 20 minutes ago, unless I wrote down the idea, it's like when I have dreams and I wake up, that's how that sometimes feels with improv. It's like, I was like, I did something and people laughed and I said something and what did I say? And like, it's like, I know that it was about something and I can't remember what it was. And that's what it always, now that I think about it, now I'm just thinking this now, that's what it feels like to me when I can't remember something in improv. It feels like a dream that I'm like, I had a dream and it was very vivid and I know it was about something, but I can't remember, but I remember it in my brain at night. I remember dreaming it. That's how I feel like improv feels to me when I'm done with the show, of like certain times where I'm like, I was like, there was that thing that someone thought was so funny. And I remember I remember them laughing, but what did I say? What did I do? And so those are interesting things.
I think this is completely applicable and hopefully not too deep, but in one of the talks that I give, I'm a public speaker as well. And one of the talks that I give a quote by Maya Angelou, the poet, the American poet. And it's not her idea. It's an older idea, but she's the one that kind of brought it into modern day and made it popular.
Mm-hmm.
And the quote, I'm paraphrasing now, is something to the effect of, people won't remember what you said or people won't remember what you did, but people will always remember how you made them feel. And I really believe that that's true. You may not remember the details of the circumstances, exactly the words that were said, but you'll remember how funny that moment was, or how scary or how emotional that moment was. And that's true in my own life. And I think that that's very true in general too, that people remember emotional feelings of a scene or something like that. And that's how it is on stage. You're connecting with the audience and they say, I love when you did that thing or said that thing. You're like, I did. I remember how it made me feel. And it certainly made you feel a certain way, but I don't remember all the details.
I love that because it reminds me of one thing I was taught at IO, but one thing I was taught at UCB. I mean, they taught basically the same thing, but in different ways, because that's how philosophies work for different places. But UCB, it was, okay, there's one person who's going to like say something really like mundane, like, look, it's a tree. And the other person, you're going to have an over exaggerated reaction to what it is. It doesn't matter if it's a happy it's like someone. So if like you said, look, it's a tree, my response would either be like, ah, I hate trees, or like, oh my gosh, trees are amazing, because it had that emotional connection. So later on, if we bring that character back, we know exactly what their thing is that they're like so mind blown by the most mundane of things. And at IO, the way in which it was kind of described was, it's like, have a point of view with a strong emotion. So like the idea of like, look, it's a tree. It's like, I love trees. I love trees. You know, I love trees because fall is my favorite season. I love everything about fall, but I don't like winter. Winter is the worst. Winter is it's too cold. And then you go back and you bring this character back in a callback. You can either let them live in fall, or you let them like be very miserable in winter. Mm-hmm. Like you don't go summer, you don't go spring, you go straight to fall, which they love and adore, and we know that. But also because they've said they hated winter, you could also bring them into winter and let them live in how much they hate it. Like, look at all this snow. I hate winter. I just took out my, I see, you can see my.
That's how much you hate winter.
I took out my earbuds, which I found out my wireless I don't have Bluetooth on this computer, so I can't do my wireless. So they keep getting knocked out. That's just me. Anyway, on another segue.
That's what hatred of winter will do to you.
I know. I mean, I like winter. I think sometimes it's a little cold, but sometimes it's a little too hot. So I think if they just kind of made it fall season, it would just. I'm from Florida, so Florida.
If they had condos on the sun, I'd move. I'm that kind of person.
Right. Well, that's the thing is, like, from Florida, it's the running joke, because there's spring, summer, fall, and winter, and generally in Florida, like there's like 4 seasons, which is summer, winter, hurricane, and football. Those are the seasons. So it's whether or not it's a running thing or something that I just in my mind made up and have now decided that it's a fact, it actually makes sense. It's summer, winter, hurricane, and football. Those are the seasons. Yeah. Maybe alligator season is a minor. It's like fall and autumn. So it's like hurricane and alligator season. Like they're interchangeable. Yeah. But
you're in trouble.
On another segue, see, this is on my Paul Blart Mall Cop segue. From the first one, I haven't seen the second one. I don't know. Anyways, that all being said, see, most of this is just like half an hour of me just like figuring out how to explain things. So that's why all these videos are gonna end up being like 15 minutes. It's gonna be like 2 hours of bloopers of me just like talking and being like, so
you could make a whole nother interview out of just those.
Yeah, and it's funny because I did a self-tape, was it yesterday, and they're like, just introduce yourself, say where you're located, and your union status. And I literally like kind of did the whole foot and mouth thing, because I literally went, hi, I'm Spencer Frankenberger. I currently live in North Hollywood, California, and I'm SAG eligible, which obviously means I'm non-union, and you know that. This is me without glasses, and with glasses. Thank you. And then I just sent that take. I was like, whatever, it's my personality. It was not wrong. It was just, I was like obviously explaining something that they know.
Yeah.
And so I was like, that. Okay. So that being said, kind of in a way it can segue into this question, I think. So as a teacher and as a improv student of life, let's say an improv life student, because these could have different answers, they could be the same answer. What to you makes a successful improviser? And successful can be not necessarily like they're Amy Poehler successful. It can be literally like in a scene or in the span of whatever. What makes a successful improviser to you, either as a teacher, as a performer, or a combination of the two?
That's a good question. I like it because success is something that I talk to a lot of people about. Success is a ruler, and you can use different rulers to measure different types of things. If you use a yardstick to try and measure how hot it is in a room, it's not going to do you much good. But if you use a thermometer to try and measure how tall a chair is, that's not going to do you much good. So you have to use the proper measure for the proper thing. So when people talk about success, I say, well, which ruler are you using to measure success? Are you using the money ruler? Are you using the happiness ruler? Are you using what ruler are you using to determine success? Because maybe I'm making a ton of money and I'm miserable. And by some rules, some measure, I'm not very successful if happiness is important to me. Or you flip that around and maybe I'm super happy, but I'm a pauper. Maybe somebody else would say, oh, poor Damian, he's not very successful, when I'm very, very happy and that's what's important to me. So I think it's important to find out which ruler, when you're talking about success, is important to that person. Sometimes when I'm talking to people about, I do mentoring I did just a session yesterday with a guy in India, reached out to me with some problems and issues he was having at work. And in this case, I didn't recommend he seek out improv because I don't always. But sometimes when people will come to me and seek help, after I've heard their problem and I figure out, okay, what is the root of the problem? What's really at stake here? It's not the problem with your boss. It's a miscommunication problem, or it's a trust problem, or something like that. Sometimes I'll say, maybe it's a confidence problem. You know, it's all of this stuff at work that you think is the problem is just a symptom, a side effect of the problem. Here's what's actually going on is you lack confidence. And in that case, maybe an Improv 101 class would be good for you. And I'm not going to perform on stage. I say, no, I'm not saying you should perform on stage. And I tell them the story about the 60 people in my first class that had no intention of performing on stage. I remember the teacher went down, she had everybody line up on the very first day and said, why are you here? And the first person said, well, I don't want to perform on stage. I'm really nervous. And she said, that's not what I asked. I said, why are you here? And they said, well, I'm shy. And somebody said that improv might help me make me less shy. She said, great, next person, why are you here? And they said, well, I've been tasked with giving a talk at work and I've never done public speaking and I've heard that improv can help there. And she went on down the line. Mine was, I want to perform on stage. I thought it would be great. So everybody had their different reasons and nobody reason was wrong or right. And after the weeks and months of training went on, the shy person left because they got what they needed out of it. They were less shy than they were before and they didn't need further training. And the person that had to give a talk at work felt that they could now speak more confidently in public. And so I stuck around to the end because I wanted to perform on stage. And so I needed additional training. So if you were to say to that first person, were they successful? If they became less shy and that was their goal, then I would say, yes, they became successful at improv because they learned improv principles, not necessarily performing on stage, but they learned the things that improvisers use on stage and they applied them in their context, which was becoming less shy. Therefore, they were successful. Now, maybe the guy that took improv to become a better public speaker, and he left because he thought he got what he needed, and he went and he gave talks and he stunk at it. Then I would say, somebody would say, was he successful at improv? I'd say, maybe not. Maybe he needed some more training, some more practice. Maybe that would not be reasonable to call that a success story. Now, these aren't necessarily people on stage, but if you're talking about people on stage, how do you know if you're a successful improviser? When I'm on stage performing improv, or sometimes I do it because it's fun. That's one reason I do it. So if I'm having fun, I might call that a success, whether the audience laughed or not. I had a blast. Another reason I do it, sometimes we got paid. We had paid shows. So if I made money, that's a success. I made money off of this thing that I love doing. Sometimes a way to measure success is you're trying to bring joy and entertain an audience. So how do you know if you're doing that? You can't crawl in their head and read their minds. So there's indicators. It's indirect indicators. If they're clapping and cheering and laughing, those might be indicators that if that's the ruler that you're using to measure, am I entertaining an audience? They were clapping and laughing and cheering. I might say that I succeeded. Now, if they're booing or leaving or checking their phones, and that was the purpose, that was the measuring stick, entertaining an audience, I might say that I failed at that particular improv performance. So those are a few ways I think about how to measure success. Depends on what you're measuring and then how to tell if you've succeeded or failed.
I love that. And I can definitely tell that you're a public speaker.
Well, thank you.
Because you're like, I'm gonna ask you a question, and I'm gonna answer it by asking you a question. But I also think this whole metaphor about using rulers or thermometers, I think, is great. But I think we all know that the only way to measure our own successes is the sweet smell of it, right?
Of course.
The sweet smell of success is the only way in which to measure that.
I'm successful.
It took me a while to get to that joke, but I got there. I got there. I got around to it. Anyway, that being said, yeah, I think it feels like.
I'm not being as funny as I should be, Spencer. I apologize.
It's my show. It's fine. No, I think you're doing.
So this is par for the course then.
You're being perfectly funny. You're being just as perfectly funny as you need to be. I think that's what I will say. Take it or leave it with what you will. I don't think you need to be funny. It's just be you.
How are you measuring me right now?
I mean, I don't
By how
know
funny I am? How do we know if this is a success?
That's the only reason. That's the only reason. I need to ask Hank and Stella, actually. Hank or Stella. Speaking of Hank and Stella, let's talk about what you got going on. You got a shirt here. Tell me what's going on with that shirt. I know, but tell me what's going on with that shirt.
Yeah. So after a while of doing improv and getting into theater a bit, and doing public speaking and using improv in that way, I had kids. And we're
as
reading
most
family.
improvisers do.
And again, that's that old canard.
Babies are improvised. So, you know.
It's amazing how much improv I've learned from my kids. So I have two kids. Alina is 9 and Zachary's 7. But we've been reading. We're a reading family. So my wife and I have been reading to our kids since they were very young. And that turned them into little readers. But I noticed after reading dozens or hundreds of children's books that a lot of them are very, very funny, but there's not really any educational value to them, which is nothing wrong with that. And a lot of books are very educational, but they're dry. Okay, you're learning about bats and hippos or whatever, but they're really boring books.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. So I was trying to think of a way. I like to challenge myself. And so after reading enough of these books, I thought, man, I bet I could do this. So first I had to figure out why I want to do this. I want to write a book that's both educational and entertaining. And so once I figured out edutainment, exactly. So once I figured out the why, then I had to figure out, so how do I fulfill that why? How do I make an edutainment book? And they say, write to what you know. I know something about improv. And I thought, well, I use improv in a lot of different ways in my life, professionally and personally. And I think it's very valuable. Why don't I teach improv to kids? So I decided to create a book teaching improv to children, which is secretly teaching them life skills, which is really all the underlying principles and skills of improv is secretly things that make you a better human being. And so it's kind of like the cereal that tastes great, but is secretly nutritious that your kids say, I want more of that. And they don't even know that they're eating something good for them.
I've never heard anyone say this when they talk about improv, that you can learn a lot of things outside of improv that you can take with you. I've never heard that before.
Don't spread it around. Yeah. So that's what I created. I created Hank and Stella and something from nothing. I self-published. I raised money on Kickstarter, self-published. And I originally, the story is I wrote one book. I created the entire story. Hank and Stella are my kids' real life stuffed animals. My son has a little stuffed dog and my daughter has a stuffed bunny, and those are the real names. So I figured to create a book featuring my kids' real life stuffed animals, talking and teaching improv. And I wrote one copy and I posted it on social media, and people thought it was pretty cool. And they said, wow, how do I get a copy? And I thought, well, I don't know. I just made one. And then I started to research and I realized that there's not a lot of children's books about improv. There's compilations of games and 101 great improv games for kids, but there's no improv books that teach kids about improv. And so I realized, holy cow, maybe I've found a gap, a niche that's unfilled. Maybe there's a market here. So that's when I started the Kickstarter campaign, raised some money, and started producing them. It's on Amazon. You can read the book for free online at hankandstellabooks.com. But that has spun up into elementary school visits. I go and I speak to sometimes a class of 6 kids or an entire gymnasium of 600 kids. And I start by warming them up with an improv game. I read the book to them. and I'll pause throughout the book, which is written in rhyme and it's brightly colored and illustrated. And I'll ask them questions. It's about diversity and the importance of practice. And of course, yes, and exploring and all those sorts of goody improv stuff. And at the end, I get kids to come up and we play some improv games, and it's a blast. And I've done that all around Central Ohio. So that's kind of the origin of the book. It's been a fun. I'm not paying any mortgage or any bills with the proceeds from the book. It's really a labor of love that started with an idea to create an edutainment book for my kids.
Or fungicational, depending on what you want to call it.
I like that one better.
Sounds like you're a public school speaker. Don't worry about that one. I'll cut that out.
Guy, please come to the office.
Who had the worst dad joke of the evening? This guy, because he's the only one rattling them off. So therefore, I also have the best. I'm going to cut all of this out. People need to see my true personality. Anyways, yeah, great. So I want to talk about something from nothing just a little bit, because I got the opportunity to read it, and I actually still have it. It's actually in my shelf. I put all my books in one box, but it didn't fit, so it's off to the side. So it's actually with like my Bob's Burgers cookbook and my other books that didn't fit in the thing, but I still have it.
It's in a special place.
Special place next to the bookshelf. No, it's in the bookshelf, but I mean, I got rid of a bunch of stuff, and I felt like I wanted to keep it.
You're like, my coffee table no longer wobbles. Thanks for the book, Damian.
Yeah, no, exactly. No, because what I think, and I sent you the review a while back, and I kind of sort of read it earlier, and I was like, whatever. But what I remember specifically about the book is, it's not like, I know a lot of times people think that it's like, I'm going to talk to kids like they don't know anything, which this book is not that. It's very straightforward, very simple, but it's not, it caters to kids, sure, because it's a children's book. But I think what I loved about it is that when I'm doing all these like advanced improv things, like musical improv, two-prov, and all this stuff, I forget about the basics. And reading that book was like me taking an improv 101 course for like $3 or however 10, 20, whatever the cost of the book is. But
yeah.
But what I loved about it was, it's like, oh, yes, and everything you do is right. Like all these things that I don't necessarily think about now because I'm so used to it. But having those moments where I'm like, I mean, and it took me like, what, 3 minutes to read it? It's a children's book. So, I mean, it didn't take me that long to read it. I read it, I think I got on a train. I read it on my way on the train for like one stop, and I finished it on the way. But
so you're a slow reader is what you're saying?
I actually am a slow reader, actually. I'm also a slow eater, I've discovered. Like, it took me about an hour to eat the other day. I was eating
hand in hand,
and it took me like an hour. And it's like, why does it take me so long to eat? And then my like family gets frustrated by it, and I was like, I get it, I'm Greek, I guess I should eat faster, but like I don't. I want to savor the taropita. I want to savor the spanakopita.
There you go.
I don't want to scarf it down.
You're savoring all the words.
Especially when my mom makes baklava from scratch. I'm like, I don't want to like devour this. I want to like enjoy it. But it's also just because I'm a very slow eater. It takes me forever to chew, I think. But also, like, when things are hot, I want to wait for it to actually be like cold, so I don't burn it's like a weird. Anyway, my point was with your book. Going back to your book, because this is a real big segue, bigger than the one on Paul Blart Mall Cop 2. But my point was that I feel like what I loved about the book is that it provides all those basics of improv that a lot of times more experienced improvisers forget. And it's told in a way that it's digestible, it's simple, it's not heady at all. And it's like, and again, it's a children's book. So it's like thinking about how to explain improv to kids. And what I loved about it is it does just that. But it's also for a good reminder for adults without having to like read a 400-page manual on how improv works.
Thank you.
It is good for adults to also just get those quick tidbits of like, don't forget, yes, and don't forget support. Don't forget every choice you make is right. And again, every choice you make is right to an extent, because we know there are some no-nos in improv, like, or in just in life in general. Like there are some no-nos, like no racism, no sexism, no ableism, all these things. Like none of that. We don't need that. That's a wrong choice. But for the general basis of everything in improv, every choice you make is right, and it will be supported, and it will be yes-anded. So I think that the book really covers that in a way that's simple and digestible for kids, but also in a way that's simple and digestible for adults. So
When I was seeking out reviewers, I reached out to children's book bloggers and reviewers and just tons of people. And I think that's one of the ways that we met is I was posting about,
Yep.
I'm looking for reviewers. And more than one, several people reached out and said, you know, my daughter is using this in her high school class. She took the book to school and is using it in high school. And another person, she's a professor. She has 2 young children. She's a professor at the University of Johannesburg, South Africa. She read it to her kids and she gave me their thoughts. She said, here's what my 8-year-old and my 6-year-old thought about it. But also I'm taking your book in because I teach drama at the university and I'm using sections of your book in my class at university level. I'm like, wow, that's fantastic. I never expected that.
And it's great because, and again, like, I think with like now the kids these days, I say that like, because I'm turning 30 soon. So it's been a long time since I've been a kid at this point, but kids these days with TikTok, with what was Vine before, YouTube, all this access to social media, everything is in smaller fragments and smaller tidbits. So if you give someone like a 200-page book, they're gonna be like, maybe. But if you're like, hey, read this page, it's like 8 words on the page, you get the idea. You're like, oh, every choice I make is right. Great, I'm ready to improvise. Like it's so digestible in that way too, because it is just like a quick, like just a, hey, quick reminder, hey, we got 1 minute left before the bell, don't forget, yes and, or whatever. And so I think that you also picked a surprisingly niche market, but surprisingly also much more broad, of the idea of, one, kids having access to the imagination of improv. Because with improv, there's literally, imagination is endless. Like there's literally, and especially in the kids version, they're not going to be thinking racism, sexism, ableism. That's, you know, they're not for the most part, not getting into that world yet, because they haven't witnessed it, they haven't understood it, they haven't learned about it, they don't know that it's very wrong, but they haven't lived in that world yet to identify that it's wrong and all that stuff. So they're not thinking about that. So they're not doing those kind of things. So they're just enjoying like being a princess or being a dragon, or, you know, like my stuffed bunny is going to talk. Great. Yes. Awesome. And my stuffed dog is going to talk. Let's name our animals. Great. I'm going to name mine Stella. I love that name. I'm naming mine Hank, right? That's a whole scene. But it's from the perspective of a kid, or from the perspective of someone who, even then, I remember from a 101 class being like, okay, we're building a party. You guys are going to talk about it. It's like, we're going to have a party. Yes. And we are going to invite a lot of people. Yes. And we are going to make our snacks beforehand. Yes. And we are going to have a lot of snacks. Yes. And we just said yes and just added a bit of information. And I think that what makes this book, but also this idea of improv for kids, is, yes, it's a stepping stone to learning, and you build on these ideas, but you got to go to the heart of the matter. What is the root of improv? Listening, support, yes and. Not these like fancy like musical tricks that you can do off the cuff, or like these witty puns that I'm very great at. First you got to think about the yes and, the support, the listening, which all is parts of your book. And that's what I love, is that it's a great like little like, it's like the actor's toolkit or the improviser's toolkit. It's a great, like, if I could fold the book up and like literally put it in my pocket, then, it's one of those things where I could be like, I'm working with less experienced improvisers, or what am I not doing? I keep saying no to my partner. Let me check it. Yes. And got it. Right. So I think that that's what's great. And I think that I'll be honest, there's children's books that I love all day, and I use them when I teach preschoolers music, but I also use them as I'm like, this book really understands like where I'm at in my life. Like, like corduroy, like what he like lost his button or whatever. He's trying to find it. I'm like, I think I've lost my mind. I'm trying to find that. I feel like corduroy, like old school, like at night, like what's going on?
Yeah.
So anyway, but my point was,
there was a conscious decision I made for the book that you talked about kids using their imagination, and kind of the stepping stones to learning. And as somebody that teaches communication to adults and effective semantics, linguistics, proper communication, there's a lot of different ways to get the thing that's in my head into your head. And words are one way that we do it. And if people are confused about words, you can give definitions, and you can use hand gestures and facial expressions and vocal tone and speed of. But another way you can get an idea from my head into yours is examples. That's a great way. If somebody's still not getting what you're saying, you can give examples. There's no examples of improv in my book, and I consciously decided not to, because with children especially, if you give a specific example, they can get too caught up on that example only. So if you say, hey, in improv, it's important to use your imagination and think of something imaginary, and they say, like what? And if my book said, imagine you're a spaceman or an astronaut or a dragon slayer. Okay, kids, who can think of what? Give me a word. All the kids would raise their hand and go, spaceman, dragon slayer. They get too caught up.
Yeah.
So I decided it's almost like a MacGuffin in my book, where the thing itself is not important. It's the idea around the thing. And that's why I chose not to give any examples at all, so that they could focus on the idea, and it forces the kids to use their imagination.
Yeah, I love that. It's like, I don't remember, this might've been in the book. It's been a while since I've read it, but again, I mean, also I could go back and read it in about 10 minutes or probably less than 10 minutes.
You know where it is. Like, it's in that special place.
It's in that space by my bookshelf. But I was going to say, it's like the idea, and this, I feel like this might've been in there in a loose way, but it was like, let's play pretend. Yeah. What do you want to do? I can do whatever I want. I'm playing pretend. It's like that idea of like, oh, I'm not giving you specific examples, which I've also learned. I can't give suggestions when I'm like, okay, let me get a suggestion of a location, like an ice cream shop, or what else? Ice cream shop. Yeah, okay, all right. I've learned when I teach kids, I can't give them specific suggestions because they will just give me the suggestion right back.
Exactly. Yeah.
But then when they get in the scene, they're like, I'm in an ice cream shop in space. And in space, it's I'm going to the mall in space, and inside that mall, I'm in a rocket ship. I'm like, what? You have all these ideas, but you started an ice cream shop because that's what I suggested. Like, what?
Yeah.
Kids are wild.
Improv with kids is fascinating.
The kids that I teach, they would get. I'm like, okay, let's get a location in a box. I'm like, okay, anything else besides a box, around a box, under a box. I'm like, okay, nothing with boxes. What about 2 boxes? Okay. And then of course it was the pee poop fart. And I was like, all right, no more of that. Okay, vomit. Okay, no more bodily functions. How about being in a box? I'm like, okay, I guess I'll go with being in a box. And then they're like, the scene starts with, it's like, look, I'm in a box. Do you want to come in my box? Yes, I do. I would like to be in your box. Wow, this is a nice box. Thanks. Do you want to share this box? Yes. Yeah. I'm just like, okay, yes. Great. I love the yes anding. Maybe let's not be in a box.
I guess it's not so much different than bar prov when you ever get for is dildo or masturbation, right?
Oh, or improv. I get a lot of improv. I get a lot of pineapple. I get a lot of pickle.
Pickle, really?
And I think people just think it's like funny. But I also know I've seen so many times where I get the suggestion of pineapple and the first scene's a luau. Yeah. I'm like, whoa, think of something new, please.
A weird one that crops up for me is canoeing. Give me an outside activity. Canoeing. Wow. It comes up oddly often in my experience.
Think it's like people think they're trying to be smart, and they're like, we've already had 8 other smart people like you come in. So you're try being a little like, instead of pineapple, maybe like carambola. Or the smelly one, durian. Like, give me something different.
Yeah,
I might still be at a luau, but give me something different. So that's what I think. On that note, let me a couple final questions here. So let's say you're teaching a class, or you're coaching a team or whatever, and you've got maybe a person who's come for the first time. They're like a 101 improviser. Like, it's obvious they're a 101 improviser. And then you've got someone who maybe has graduated from a lot of programs, and maybe they're in a jam or whatever. And you can tell that they've had like years of experience. How do you, what was like a tip or advice you'd give to the improviser who's never done any improv, who's like freaking out, so that they feel supported, but also that the other improviser feels like they're also being supported in strong choices, I guess, like, if that makes any sense. How can they both shine on stage?
So you've got an experienced and an inexperienced improviser on stage, and they're both struggling?
I wouldn't even say necessarily they're struggling. I would say it's more of this, let's say it's a first time improv jam person who's terrified of being on stage. And then
Yeah.
you have this experienced improviser who's so good at improv that maybe they're worried that like, oh, this person's not great. It might show that I'm not as good as I am or whatever, which most improvisers aren't that way. But if that makes it more clear of like, how can they both, how can the inexperienced improviser feel experienced, and how can the experienced improviser support the inexperienced improvisers' choices to also feel like they're still at their experienced level?
That's tough. That's a
Yeah,
tough one.
it's a tricky one. It's a hard question to answer.
Yeah, I don't know. I suppose it would change on a case by case basis, but maybe for the experienced person, I might suggest that, there's a lot of different ways that they can shine on stage and people will go, wow, that guy is really amazing. I thought he was amazing, but he just showed that he is amazing.
Mm.
A lot of different ways that they can do that. One of the ways is being super ultra supportive of the partner, rather than taking all the lines and being so clever and witty or whatever, just showing how incredibly supportive they are to somebody that knows improv, or even an audience member that doesn't know improv might be wowed by that. And so that's one way that they could show off their improv skills, is by being super supportive.
Mm-hmm.
Look how good I am. I don't even need to have the spotlight moves around on stage, but I'm more happy shining it on the other person and reflecting it to them. That's how good I am. And maybe for the person that's new to improv and scared, this is the same thing. As a public speaker, I have a variety of different talks, but I have a whole series called Improv. It's the word improve with the E in parentheses. How clever. Improv, improve your communication, your testing, yourself. So I basically take improv principles and skills, I kind of name them, and I teach how this particular rule or principle or skill applies in an improv setting when you're on stage. How does yes and or no driving or explore and heighten or listen or focus on the relationship, all these different things, how does that work in improv and make you a more successful improviser on stage? And once I teach them that and explain it, then we do a little improv scene to demonstrate it. And then I move over to some other context. They might be in software IT. They might be an executive. They might be somebody that's in a communication class. They might be a variety of different things. I'll say, guess what? That same rule that helps you on stage and helps an improviser in a scene will help you as an accountant or an executive or a high school student. And I'll explain how, and then we'll demonstrate it. We walk through a little scenario on how that particular principle or rule, air quote, rule of improv can help them in that way. So I say all that because one of the things I teach is oopsortunity. It's my little cute way of saying,
I love that.
There's no mistakes in improv, which is an old idea, comes from jazz and it's a very old idea. And recently Tina Fey and Bossy Pants and all that. So it's just oft repeated idea that there's really nothing that can go wrong in improv. New people to improv they may have heard that, or maybe they haven't heard it, but even if they've heard it, they might not believe it. So helping that new person believe it, that this is truly a safe space. It's not just a saying or an idiom that people like to toss around. It really is at the heart of improv. There's no mistakes. And if you can help them understand that, that might take some of their anxiety away and make them more confident and less apprehensive about performing on stage. So your question was how to make an experienced person shine. Tell them to shine by showing support. How to make an inexperienced person less scared. Help them understand and truly believe in their heart that there's no mistakes in improv, which is how I start all of these different talks. Before getting into all the individual rules, I go over some umbrella kind of tenets, overruling tenets of improv that are true regardless.
I love that. On another segue, there's a lot of segues today. It's like the Segway tour. When you are on Segways outside, it's a big old Segway tour with my not so great, could be better object work. Besides your book, and also including your book, is there anything else you want to pitch or plug before we get into the last question?
Well, I mentioned the hankandstellabooks.com. That's where you can read my book for free online, order it, check out your review and all sorts of other good stuff. As a public speaker, my company is Ineffable Solutions. My website's ineffable-solutions.com. And some of it might be vaguely tangentially interesting to your audience, but some of it might be directly interesting because of the talks called Improv or Improve Your X, Improve Your Communication, which take improv principles and skills and apply them to certain contexts. I've given talks all around the world to audiences of junkyard owners, college administrators, IT professionals, executives. I did a training class for the Ohio State School for the Blind, right, to take my entire curriculum and figure out how I could do it for visually handicapped students and make it all so there was no sight involved. And all of that type of stuff you can read at the ineffable-solutions.com. I think those are the only two plugs. As a public speaker during the pandemic, work has kind of plummeted. I'm not really into the online thing. I like being in the same room with people, to be hot and cold with them at the same time and read their body language and pivot and improvise as I speak. And it's really tough to do through webinars or recordings. So I put my speaking career on hiatus until this all blows over. And I'm doing artwork. I just finished illustrating a book for somebody that reached out to me online. So I'm using my art to try and carry me through for the time being. And some of that is on my website as well.
Throw that creativity into the mix, but take the Corona out.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, we're getting to the point where I don't have any good dad jokes left. That being said, I have one more question for you.
All right.
And that question is the reason why I've been doing this summit, which I kind of briefed you on prior. So you kind of have you had 40 minutes to think about it. But I always hear the question, where should I take improv? Because I've done a lot of improv from different places. And for me, it's such a loaded question that there are certain things that I have to like decipher to be like, oh, like what, I don't know what you want me to answer for this. Because people just want an answer. They want me to tell them a place to go. But it's a little bit more complicated than that. If someone came up to you and said, Damian, where should I take improv? What is like one bit of advice or one tidbit or something that you'd say to them to help guide them on their journey to finding the right improv for them?
I suppose if I just wanted to, blow them off and get them off my doorstep, I just tell them of a local class, but that wouldn't be very helpful. They might get the quick silver bullet answer that they were hoping for, but might not be very useful to them. If I wanted to dig a little deeper, it kind of goes back to that whole measuring success. I'd ask them, what are you trying to accomplish? Why are you even interested in improv? And I remember that time where my teacher lined everybody up and went down and said, why are you here? And there's no wrong answer. So I would ask them, they say, hey, Damian, where should I take improv? I'd say, well, why do you want to take improv? And if they'd say to perform on stage or to become less shy or to become a better public speaker or whatever their reason is, I would dig into that a little bit more and tell them what improv might be able to help them with in that case, or what it might not be able to help them with. If I say, what are you trying to accomplish? And they say, I personally, I believe that improv can affect almost every area of our life. This is why I have improv your X. I mean, the X can be filled with any occupation in there, improv your whatever. Mm-hmm. I think it's very, very versatile. But that doesn't mean always. There might be some times that people say, Damian, where can I take improv? And I say, why do you want to take improv? And they say, well, here's what I'm trying to achieve, what I'm trying to accomplish. And after I've heard them out, I say, you know what? This is a rare case. I don't think improv is going to help you accomplish that. If that's what you're trying to get to, maybe improv 101 is not going to get you there. Maybe improv is not the right answer at this time for that particular question. But if I do understand their question a little deeper, then I can more target which local teacher or which local class or which online course or what resources they can go to best get them the improv knowledge that is specific for their particular problem that they're trying to solve.
That's great.
Thanks.
That's great. For whatever reason, I keep moving and I realize that my box I keep getting smaller and smaller. I don't know. Yeah. Yes. And me. That's great. I love it. So I said that was the last question, but I lied.
Liar.
I do on every video because I always make that as a bit, and I'm sure it's not funny anymore, but that's okay. I would like to present you with an opportunity to do an improv scene with me. What do you think?
No. All right.
I mean, the number one rule of improv is no.
Yeah.
So it's not, by the way, if you don't understand sarcasm, it's not. It's not. Yes, and actually listening and yes, and support are all big things. So let's take a look, and we'll do like 2 minutes or whatever. Either one of us can cut it off at the end.
All right.
This is my sign. It's sign language for stop.
Is that your clapper?
Right. Yeah. And improv. I think this is improv actually.
I had to learn. I learned when I was teaching at the School for the Blind. I learned a little bit of rudimentary ASL.
Interesting. Yeah. Great. So let's go off this website here. There's options to get a location, a relationship, or a word. Which of the categories would you like to go off of?
Food. Oh, was that not one of them? Okay.
No,
word then. Word gives us the most broad possibilities.
Great. The suggestion is trophy. Thank you, trophy.
Trophy?
Yeah, trophy.
This is a Greek word, trophy.
Yeah, it's come from the Greek. What does it come from? The Greek word?
The Greek word for trophy comes from atrophy, which means when your muscles become very tight, they don't move anymore. This is just like the statue on the trophy does not move, you see.
Yeah, comes from ruha, meaning clothes, because it sounds very similar. So there you go. All right, yeah. So trophy. Here we go.
All right, son. It's not first place, but it's something. I hope you're happy.
Well, I was kind of hoping for first place. This is like a consolation prize. I don't want this.
Not everyone can be first place, son. Not everyone can be first place. This is your first lesson. This is why you're never going to get a first place trophy.
I deserve first place.
Why do you deserve first place?
Well, I mean, I'm the only kid in school that doesn't have a first place trophy, and so therefore I deserve a first place trophy.
You have lots and lots and lots of second place trophies and third place trophies. Nobody has more fourth place trophies than you.
Dad, I don't know if that's a good thing.
That's fantastic. If you're counting number of trophies, boy, you have the most of anybody in school. Good for you, son.
I do have the most trophies, don't I?
Yeah. See, now you're starting to learn. And not only that, your trophies are the shiniest.
I mean, I polish them every day, so that's kind of on me. But I was going to say, also thinking about it now, because I have a lot of fourth place trophies, if you add all the numbers up, I have the most numbers on my trophies.
See, and you've always been good at math. You're always good at math. And they don't give out trophies for math, but I know that you're the best math kid in the whole school.
So maybe I could be first place in math.
What? It's not about trophies, son. It's about making me proud.
Well, I mean, yeah, that's great.
And you make me proud every day.
So then I'd make you proud if I had a first place trophy.
Son, if you had 10 first place trophies, I couldn't be happier than I am of you right now.
Wait.
If you had 100 first place trophies, if you had 30 fourth place trophies, or 1 ninth place trophy, if you put all the trophies together, even if they weren't shiny, son, if you had no trophies at all, or 7 trophies that were first through 6th place, do you understand what I'm saying?
It's a lot of trophies. But you know the trophy that I'm missing?
What's that?
First place trophy.
All right. I wasn't going to give this to you until your birthday, but...
Is it a first place trophy?
No.
Oh.
Son, it's a 0th place trophy. 0. That's before 1.
Oh.
0. You're good at math. You know that 0 comes before 1. That's even better.
Yeah, I feel like Dad, I appreciate
You're
it.
0.
I feel like I know what you're trying to do. I feel like you're trying to cheer me up, but honestly, 0 is not a place. So I just feel like now this is like, I didn't even place.
What? If you turn it sideways, it's an egg? It's an egg trophy?
I mean, yes.
Son, you're concentrating too much on numbers and places and trophies. Just hug me. Hug me.
Can I get a first place trophy?
If you hug me, I'll give you a first place trophy.
Okay. So where's my first place
It was okay. It was okay. Second place hug.
Okay. Great. Scene. We'll call it there. Well, everybody, that's the Improv Summit. Thank you so much, Damian, for coming. I'll see you next time. Bye.